The USS George H.W. Bush has become the center of attention in the eastern Mediterranean after a containerized laser system was spotted on deck, while Iran's April 19, 2026 seizure of the MV Tuska set off a drone retaliation cycle that is now reshaping the regional threat picture. The sequence has put U.S. naval defenses, Iranian unmanned systems, and the broader rules of maritime escalation under immediate scrutiny. The laser installation, described by defense observers as a containerized directed energy platform, signals a shift in how the Navy is preparing to counter low-cost aerial threats. Systems of this type are designed to engage drones and small boats at the speed of light, with deep magazines limited mainly by power generation and thermal management rather than conventional ammunition. That matters because the current fight is not about one ship or one incident. It is about whether a carrier strike group can absorb repeated drone pressure without burning through interceptors. The timing is critical. On April 19, 2026, Iranian forces seized the MV Tuska, a move that quickly triggered a retaliatory drone response and widened the operational picture across the Gulf and adjacent sea lanes. The seizure was not just a maritime detention. It was a signal that Tehran remains willing to use commercial shipping as leverage, even at the risk of provoking a direct military answer. In practical terms, that means every tanker, freighter, and escort vessel in the region now has to be treated as part of the battle space. U.S. planners are reading the situation through a cost exchange lens. A single interceptor missile can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, while a one-way attack drone may cost a fraction of that amount. That imbalance is the real pressure point. If Iran can force repeated defensive launches, it can drain magazines, stress crews, and create openings for follow-on attacks. The laser on the Bush is meant to break that equation, at least against slower and smaller targets. The carrier itself is not just a symbol. The USS George H.W. Bush is a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with a flight deck built to launch and recover high-tempo air operations, backed by layered escorts carrying radar, missiles, and electronic warfare systems. In a contested maritime environment, that combination is supposed to create depth. But depth only matters if the defensive stack can keep pace with the volume of incoming threats. That is where directed energy becomes strategically relevant. Iran, for its part, has spent years building a drone force that is cheap, distributed, and difficult to fully suppress. The model is simple: saturate defenses, force decisions, and exploit any gap in coverage. The seizure of the MV Tuska fits that pattern because it creates both a political message and an operational distraction. It also raises the odds of miscalculation, since each side now has to assume the other is watching for weakness. Military analysts say the broader implication is clear. The contest is no longer only about who can strike first. It is about who can sustain the fight longer without exhausting expensive interceptors, overloading sensors, or exposing a gap in coverage. The laser on the Bush is a response to that reality, not a cure for it. The real threat is not Tehran, but the math. The cost exchange problem is now the central issue for U.S. naval planners in the Gulf, where a carrier strike group can be forced to spend high-end missiles against low-cost one-way drones that are built to be expendable. A single defensive shot can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, while an attacking drone may cost only a small fraction of that amount, creating a lopsided exchange that favors the attacker if it can be repeated often enough. That imbalance matters because magazine depth is finite. A carrier strike group carries layered defenses, but each layer has limits, and every launch consumes inventory that cannot be recovered in the middle of a fight. If the threat keeps coming in waves, the defender is forced into a brutal calculation: spend expensive interceptors now, or risk letting a drone through later when the magazine is thinner and the pressure is higher. Aegis combat systems are built to manage that problem, but they are not infinite. The system can track multiple targets, assign interceptors, and coordinate with escorts, yet it still depends on available missiles, sensor quality, and time to react. Against a small number of fast, complex threats, that architecture is formidable. Against repeated drone salvos, it becomes a resource management problem as much as a fire control problem. The Standard missile family gives the Navy reach and flexibility, but it also carries a cost. SM-2 and SM 6 interceptors are designed for demanding air and missile defense missions, and their performance comes with a price tag that makes sense against aircraft or cruise missiles, not against a stream of cheap unmanned systems. When those missiles are used to stop drones that cost far less than the interceptor itself, the defender is paying a premium just to stay in the game. The same pressure applies to the Evolved Sea Sparrow missile, or ESSM. It is a shorter-range defensive weapon, faster to cycle and better suited for close-in layered defense, but it is still a guided missile with a finite magazine. In a sustained drone fight, ESSM becomes part of the same arithmetic. Every launch buys time, but every launch also burns depth. The result is a defensive stack that can be overwhelmed not by one dramatic strike, but by repetition. That is why cheap one-way drones are such a serious operational problem. They do not need to penetrate every layer. They only need to force the defender to react, again and again, until the magazine starts to empty. Once that happens, the attacker does not need to win the first exchange. It only needs to survive long enough to make the next one easier. This is the logic behind saturation tactics. A drone does not have to be sophisticated to be effective. It only has to be numerous, persistent, and cheap enough that losing it does not matter. If even a portion of the swarm is intercepted, the attacker may still achieve its objective by exhausting the defender's missiles, distracting the crew, and opening a narrow gap in coverage. For a carrier strike group, that gap is dangerous. The carrier is protected by destroyers, cruisers, aircraft, electronic warfare, and layered missile defenses, but the entire formation depends on coordinated response. If sensors are saturated and interceptors are spent on low-value targets, the strike group's margin for error shrinks fast. That is the real threat, not a single drone, but the cumulative drain on readiness. Defense analysts say this is where directed energy begins to matter. A laser does not solve every problem, and it does not replace missiles against all threats. But against slow, small, low-cost drones, it changes the economics of defense by offering a shot that is limited more by power and heat than by magazine count. That makes it a useful tool in a fight defined by attrition. Still, the broader strategic picture remains unchanged. Iran and other regional actors have learned that inexpensive unmanned systems can impose disproportionate costs on a far more capable navy. The United States can absorb that pressure for a time, but not indefinitely, and every defensive launch is a reminder that modern maritime warfare is now shaped as much by economics as by firepower. A laser changes the equation, but not the war. The Navy's containerized Locust laser is now being positioned for deployment aboard CVN-77, where it is expected to add a short-range layer of defense against drones and other low-cost aerial threats, but not to replace missile interceptors or close-in guns. Defense officials say the system is designed to buy reaction time, not to create a shield that can stop every incoming weapon. Locust is built around directed energy engagement, which means it can fire as long as shipboard power and thermal management remain within limits. That gives it a major advantage in a swarm fight, where magazine depth is the central problem. A laser does not run out of missiles, and it does not force the crew to choose between a $100,000 shot and a $20,000 target. It changes the economics of the engagement, one beam at a time. But the system has hard limits. A laser's effectiveness drops quickly against fast, maneuvering, or hardened threats, especially missiles with high speed, steep terminal dives, or countermeasures designed to break tracking. Weather also matters. Smoke, haze, sea spray, and atmospheric distortion can reduce beam quality and shorten the effective engagement window. Against advanced anti-ship missiles, Locust is not a decisive answer. It is a narrow tool for a narrow problem. That distinction matters because the next threat is not likely to be a single drone. It is likely to be a mixed raid. Small unmanned systems can arrive first, forcing sensors to work and crews to react. Faster cruise missiles or sea-skimming weapons can follow, using the confusion to compress decision time. In that environment, a laser helps only if it is integrated into a larger defensive architecture that includes radar queuing, electronic warfare, missile interceptors, and rapid-fire guns. On CVN-77, that means Locust would function as part of a layered defense plan rather than as a standalone breakthrough. The carrier's escorts still carry the burden of long-range detection and mid-course interception. The laser is there to handle the targets that are cheap, numerous, and close enough to make every second count. It is a force multiplier, not a force substitute. Analysts say that is the real lesson of swarm pressure at sea. The future of naval defense is moving toward mixed systems that combine missiles, guns, jammers, and directed energy in a single kill chain. Each layer solves a different problem. Missiles reach far. Guns react fast. Jammers disrupt guidance. Lasers offer low-cost shots against expendable threats. None of them is enough alone. The strategic implication is clear. As adversaries continue to field inexpensive drones and more capable anti-ship missiles, the Navy will need defenses that can scale without collapsing under cost. That means more power generation, better thermal control, faster sensor fusion, and tighter coordination across the strike group. It also means accepting that naval superiority is no longer measured only by firepower. It is measured by endurance. A senior defense analyst familiar with carrier air defense said the shift is already underway. The fleet can absorb a raid, but it cannot afford to treat every target the same, the analyst said. The winning side will be the one that preserves magazine depth while keeping the formation intact. That is why Locust matters, even with its limits. It gives the carrier another option in the close fight, and in modern maritime warfare, options are time. But time is not the same as safety. The fleet gains time, not immunity.